Before I get started and introduce myself, I just want to say how honored and privileged I am to be here with you today. You know, Georgette has been such a pivotal, just beautiful woman for me, but also for the abortion healing movement. And it's so neat to see how from generation to generation, the baton continues to get tossed. And so I've called her the matriarch of the abortion healing movement at times. She said, no, there were some that came before me, but nonetheless, Georgette, I'm so grateful that you would see just an opportunity for us to be able to breathe life into the folks that you serve and see value in that. And thank you for all that you've done for the mission and the work that we get to do now. That deserves a round of applause if they're not applauding for you. But without further ado, as Georgette said, my name is Lisa Rowe. I am a psychotherapist by trade, and so that means that I am a therapist and I work with individuals in a lot of different arenas. And a little bit about my backstory for you to understand kind of where I'm coming from today is that when I graduated grad school, I began working with vulnerable populations, foster youth, foster parents, parents that had had their children removed. I moved on to working with the teen parents in our local high school. They would come to school and their children would be served in our childcare center. And I got to kind of see the nuances of all of that, all the vulnerabilities that come with that. And then my career took me to working with sex trafficking survivors and learned a great deal there as well. And then I was the director of our local pregnancy center for a season, and that's where I was introduced to support after abortion. And along that journey, you know, God always has that golden thread or that silver lining. I really was trying to understand what these areas of my life had to do with each other. Simultaneously, I was going through my own journey of healing and learning about the dysfunction of my childhood. And what I grew to understand is that we are more alike than we are different. Although all of those symptoms of those vulnerable populations I was serving look different on the outside, underneath the surface, it was the same human. It was the same human searching for purpose, searching for connection, searching for belonging, searching for an understanding of all the dysfunction that happened in their world. And so as I began to see the lining through everything, the girl that experienced fostering as a child, the young woman who was a teen mom, the woman who was trafficked, the woman who was facing unexpected pregnancy, the woman who was facing the decision or being forced into an abortion experience, they were all so similar in their heart. And so I love how we opened up this conference and the idea that this is not as much of a political issue as it is a spiritual issue. And I would take it one step further to say it's a human issue. At the core of all of it, it is a human issue. You know, in my work as a therapist, we talk about how important it is to understand alignment, the mind, the body, and the spiritual connection. And when those things aren't aligned and they don't talk to each other, it's very difficult to walk in a healthy way. And so I really just want to start that conversation with you as we begin to talk about abortion and the research we've uncovered, because it makes sense to me to understand abortion as one of the things that our humanity experiences, not outside of all of the experiences that we have. Again, I want to just say that again, abortion is one of the things that our humanity experiences as we walk through our lives in trying to manage ourselves in terms of dysfunctions and traumas and wounds. And so I think our churches, I think our culture, I think a lot of the narrative puts abortion over here instead of allowing it to be one of the things. And so I like to say often that people who've experienced divorce and substance abuse, anxiety, depression, any sort of adverse experience can at some level understand what is going on in the heart and mind of a person when they are faced with an abortion or multiple abortions. And so it's really important for me for me to help you understand that and see that this way as we begin to understand, just like Georgette's calling us to, how can we have that one conversation every day? How can we speak to people differently? How can we change our narratives? How can we understand maybe things that we didn't understand before? And I'm hoping that today through our conversation together, that might be unveiled to you. And so just kind of to set a little bit of the precedent of how frequent is abortion happening. I think Georgette did a great job helping you understand that abortion really isn't, the numbers aren't changing. The landscape is, but the numbers aren't changing. Our research says that 1 in 4 women before their 45th birthday will experience abortion. 1 in 5 men will experience abortion by their 45th birthday. And so I just want to stop there and just say that's 25% of our childbearing group. Okay, so that's 25%, depending on your congregation, perhaps, of an age group inside of your church. And that's significant to me, because anywhere else in our communities, when 25% of a population is experiencing an adverse behavior and adverse experience, we're going to speak to it. We're going to talk about it. And I think because abortion has been over politicized and it's been culturally combative, as Georgette said, and the news that is released, we don't know how to talk about the issue without offending people, without hurting people, without making it an issue that can be touchable, perhaps. And so that's what I want to do today, is help bring this to our heart, help talk about this conversation as we do so many other experiences of the folks in our congregations, and how to be able to speak to our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues in a new and different way. We know that maybe 300 people are here today. And so with that statistic in mind, many of you have experienced abortion yourself. And if you haven't been personally affected, you know somebody who has. And so again, we are more alike than we are different. And I think it's really important that we understand how we negotiate our conversations as it relates to that. I believe that we are only 2 people removed at times from those that have experienced abortions. And if we carry our heart and our mind in that way, I think our conversations change. I think we begin to grow more aware of what is going on around us, what might be in the hearts and minds. And I think it's also important to know that many people who've experienced abortions from 70s and 80s, they are still carrying these secrets. I counsel folks every day that nobody has ever asked them about their abortion experiences. And at 65 years old, they're releasing this shame and this secret after all these years because they didn't feel like it was safe to talk about it. Now, our generation today, it's feeling a little bit different as we begin to connect with folks on our abortion helpline. We're learning that because the landscape is changing in our abortion world, things are shifting inside the hearts and minds of folks, and they're reaching out sooner. So I think this is the next step for us to understanding what's happening in our space, in the abortion landscape world. And so perhaps you are very familiar with surgical abortion, and that is how we started on this journey as people began to experience abortions. And in 2000, we began to see an uptick in those that were experiencing at-home abortions, pill abortions. You hear all different chemical abortions. You hear a lot of different names for the most popular way to experience abortion today. And I think it's really important that we understand that, because what's changed is a woman would go inside of an abortion clinic, she'd be anesthetized, she'd leave somewhat groggy, and she would have had an experience at a clinic with other people around her, good, bad, or indifferent, but she was with people and she was medicated. Today, what is happening is that women are finding drugs on the black market. They're finding drugs online. They're able to get these drugs prescribed to them, and they're at home, they're in bathrooms at work, they're wherever they are, most of the time alone, experiencing the impacts of abortion. And so what happens in that moment, unmedicated, disconnected from people, is they are yearning for support. And so oftentimes people are reaching out to us 3-4 weeks after their abortion experience, sometimes right away, because it's so heavy and difficult for them to walk through on their own. And so we're seeing this shift in the landscape this way in terms of the help and support that we provide, and more reason for, like I shared at the beginning, for us to be having those compassionate conversations with our congregations, with the people we care about, because they're needing the support. It's no longer being shoved down. It's no longer being not talked about. It's coming out in different ways. when I started into this work in 2018, I barely saw a lot of conversations about abortion on the news media or anything like that. And now, I mean, it seems like every time I turn on the news, we're debating abortion, we're talking about abortion. And so it's everywhere in our culture right now. For those that are experiencing abortion or have tried to push it down, it's everywhere. And they're hearing it from a political focus. They're not hearing it from that compassionate, human, spiritual focus. And so, again, I hope that you leave today with a more maybe expansive understanding of how you can start a different conversation with them, how maybe you can mitigate whatever those other conversations are doing, and support those that are feeling challenged, are feeling convicted, perhaps, are feeling sad, and they don't know where to turn because so much of our culture has said you don't talk about this, and if you do, you talk about it politically and it's either right or wrong. We don't talk about it from a human perspective. And so we're going to move forward, and I think the message that I really want to explore with you today is this idea that we have this new frontier. Georgette did a great job expanding us into that space today after Rowe. We're in this new frontier that what used to work is no longer going to work. Less people showed up to the march. That used to work. It's not going to work. People aren't understanding what is really happening. They think because our laws are changing that everything changes. And the reality is people just go deeper into those secret spaces, and then we don't have a lot of understanding of what's really going on. And so my hope is that you can see how support after abortion actually sees having abortion end as a top-down, bottom-up approach. What do I mean by that? Well, if we can help get into the hearts and minds of families, grandparents, parents, and children, and those that have experienced abortion, we believe that that alone will begin to end and change the way people see abortion. We know that generational patterns of behavior are very predictive. We know that if you've experienced divorce as a child, you're likely going to be experiencing divorce in your adult life. If you've experienced substance abuse, you are either going to experience substance abuse or you're going to find a partner who experiences substance abuse. Our humanity is attracted to the familiar. And so with this generational idea that abortion is paid forward, it's not that a grandmother says to the daughter, like, you've got to get an abortion. But her way of being, the way she perceives pregnancy, the way she perceives her self-esteem, the way she perceives life is hugely predictive of how her daughter's then going to see life. Her daughter's going to see pregnancy. Her daughter's going to see sexual intercourse. Her daughter's going to see self-esteem. And then that falls from generation to generation. So at Support After Abortion, we believe that if we are going to truly enter this new frontier with an understanding of how expansive the abortion issue is, we need to get into the hearts and minds and begin healing the families. We need to begin healing the generations. And I specifically spoke to the female part of the generation, but men are equally impacted. And we're going to talk about the research today because they are also experiencing wounding. This is not a female-only issue, and our research is showing us that actually men have been misunderstood for a great deal of the conversation. And so as we look at this top-down, bottom-up approach, we need to look at the preventative measures, but we need to see that healing is a preventative measure. And if we can help people start the conversation, if we can help begin having a more human conversation about the abortion issues, about people's humanity and the decisions we make in our state of fight, flight, or freeze, we will have we believe at SAA that you will have a better chance of accessing their heart. And so let's kind of talk about why this has become a pro-life issue. It's not just a support after abortion, let's do the nice thing. But we know that 50% of the abortions that are happening in our country are repeat abortions. What does that mean? That means that somebody who's going in for their second, third, fourth abortion, right? They have already, let me say that differently. Somebody who's experienced abortion is going to have another abortion 50% of the time. We can end that second abortion if we get into the hearts and minds of that man and woman. And that's why Support After Abortion actually launched in 2020 as a way of saying, hey, we see something, we see a pattern here, we see another entry point as we look at the new frontier to say, if 50% of abortions are repeat abortions, we can stop those repeat abortions from happening if we begin to have compassionate conversations, if we begin to connect with the human, if we begin to provide safe places for that person to experience a conversation about what happened. It's been my experience that most of the time, men and women who experience abortion don't want to go through the abortion experience. It's no longer a question of whether am I carrying life or am I not. It's not a matter of that anymore. My conversations don't even touch that topic anymore. We are talking about what that person is experiencing in their life now. I don't think I can be a mom because I don't have a place to live. I don't think I can be a father because my father wasn't a father to me. I don't think I can do this because if I say I'm going to keep my child, my mom's going to disown me. Whatever the circumstances are, there's a plethora and spectrum, but it's no longer an issue of having the conversation about life. It's an issue of having a conversation about the heart. And we know with other issues that when we can have conversations about the heart and meet people in that dysfunctional place, in that wounded place, in that discomfort, in the disorganization, in the disconnection, that we can connect with people in a way around this issue specifically that they have never been connected to. And so that's why Support After Abortion is here. We saw the pattern. We saw a top-down, bottom-up approach. We saw a gap in the industry, and we wanted to meet the needs. And so at Support After Abortion, we are bridging the gap between the many beautiful abortion healing programs in our country and abroad, and we are helping connect the people that are looking for support to those abortion healing programs. So we say a lot of times that we're the ambulance to get men and women to the hospitals, and church is the hospital as well. So it's not just the abortion healing programs, but it's the churches as well. It's the mental health organizations. It's the sex trafficking organizations. It's other organizations that are meeting human needs in these vulnerable times. And so in doing so, Support After Abortion wanted to understand, who is it that we're serving? Why aren't more people reaching out for help? You might be a pastor here listening today, or a woman who's led an abortion healing ministry in your church, and you go, only 2 or 3 people showed up, or, it took a long time for me to gather the community in order to serve them. And that was what we were seeing too in our local community in Southwest Florida. We wanted to better understand, why aren't more people reaching out for support? Why was there only 10 people reaching out to our Project Rachel in Southwest Florida? Why do therapists tell me left and right that their clients aren't struggling or have experienced abortion? And the reality is, going back to everything I've said so far, is our culture, our political narrative, everything is contributing to the way in which people find treatment and support. And so back in 2018, my experience was that it wasn't until a woman had gone to a retreat or had gone away for the weekend and had been encountered by the Lord that she then felt really convicted to begin on that healing journey. And we want to change that. We don't want women and men to carry this burden for as long as they are. And so we really wanted to understand why people weren't reaching out for help. Truly the question underneath is abortion really a painful experience, or was that just what we had heard or we had perceived? What does this group of men and women really want us to know about them so we can serve them better? And we've been passing that information along to folks like you and all of the abortion healing folks, because we want you to be better service providers. We want you to be better people to your people. We want you to carry the baton in a way that feels more intentional. And so I want to share some of that research with you, and it might surprise you. It surprised us for sure. I'm going to break it down as we kind of talk about it. But as you listen to the research, I just want you to really kind of be investigating perhaps your own understanding, maybe ways in which you can really glean from this research and take this with you moving forward. So I'm going to do men and I'm going to do women. We studied both groups of people, both who had experienced abortions, and we really were asking questions that would help us better understand what their abortion experiences were like, how can we serve them better, what kinds of things do they need, why, and really to answer the question is, why weren't more people showing up for healing? And so the first statistic that I think is most important is that 34% of the time, And 71% of the time, women 34%, men 71% said they experienced an adverse reaction to their abortion experiences. Interesting, situation here with the difference between women and men. 34% of the time, women saying that they experienced an adverse reaction. 71% of the time, men did. Whoa, when we saw those numbers next to each other, we were shocked. Some of the things that I've learned recently and that I feel like I contribute to those numbers is, men for so long have been the villain in the abortion experiences that women walk through. And I think the pro-life community at some point has contributed to that conversation. I know I certainly have. And so what we believe to be the case is that men never really had a voice in the experience. And if you're a man listening today and that was you, I'm very sorry that you didn't feel like you had a voice in that experience. 71% of the time, that's a lot of adversity for a man to experience over a woman's pregnancy. But what we know to be true is that men didn't feel like they could be connected to that experience. And so now that somebody's finally validating them, now that somebody's finally talking about it, they're saying, oh my goodness, I actually have this wound, but I didn't know how to address it. And so that's where we feel like maybe the narrative is different between men and women. Perhaps women aren't sure how they feel about their experience, but regardless, in our country, whenever, I said this before, whenever more than 25%, more than 30% of people report an adverse reaction towards something, gun violence, school bullying, suicidal ideation, vaping in schools. I mean, it's all over our news. We have support services pouring into the schools or pouring into the community, and we don't see that in our world. And so at Support After Abortion, we're helping people understand that abortion doesn't have to be a political issue. For all intents and purposes for the whole world, it doesn't have to be a religious issue initially, right? What we want people to understand is that if 34% and 71% are reporting adverse reactions, we've got to be doing something to support them, and we've got to be meeting those folks where they are. The next statistic that I feel like is really important is 63% of women and 83% of men said that they could benefit from some sort of help and support after abortion. So 63% of women who've experienced abortion, 83% of men say, hey, yes, I would benefit from help afterwards. So if you go back to the reason that Support After Abortion started in the first place, okay, now we have this group of people that's saying, yes, we've experienced adversity, enough adversity for us to say this is worth pouring into. And way more than half say, yes, I could use support afterwards. Interesting, but why aren't they showing up? Okay, here's the kicker. 18% of the time, people knew where to go for help, and that was equal on both sides, men and women. So less than 20% of the time, men and women knew where to go for help. There's a lot of discussion at Support After Abortion as to why that is. And my personal opinion is that so many of the abortion healing ministries are very faith-based. And in order for you to access a lot of those ministries, you have to go inside of a church and be connected to the church to access those resources. Now, some of you are saying, no, anybody can come to the group. You're right. I know the hearts and minds of those of you that offer those abortion healing opportunities. But the reality is a woman and man would have to be sitting inside the church to know that that group exists. For so long, we've had to kind of hide the abortion healing ministry because there's been so many arguments and we didn't want people to feel exploited. And so oftentimes marketing and different things, they weren't allowing people to even know that they were there. And so really big issue as we've been walking through this at Support After Abortion is helping build those best practices, helping deliver opportunities for us to say, no, we actually can talk about abortion and we actually can talk about it in a loving way. The other maybe 6 months ago, 4 months ago, I was quoted in an article with many pro-choice organizations. And some of you, might be like, what is she happy about? I was happy to see that there was some opportunity for us to build a bridge, and it no longer was this contentious argument, and we could all be talking about that healing connection. And I feel like pro-choice and pro-life folks can build a bridge over this healing conversation. I have been able to take down a conversation from being political and religious to bringing it to the human conversation by just saying, but I know people who've experienced pain after abortion, and I just want to be a conduit of care for them to find the hope and healing that they deserve. And then the person on the other side often says something like, me too. And before you know it, the conversation's being driven in another way. In fact, I've been at different speaking engagements where I've had the opportunity to speak to men and women after the event, and they've said to me, Lisa, thank you for sharing with such love and compassion. It's been a long time since I've heard abortion talked about that way, and I am one of those women or men who've experienced abortion, and hearing you speak this way warms my heart. And so just kind of offering you a space to understand that there are folks that you don't realize are right there connected to you that are needing your support, but don't know how to access it, don't know how to talk about it, and certainly don't even know that it's available. Okay. So you may be listening right now and you're like, well, gosh, I want to do something about it. I want to change the narrative. I want to offer something. And here's what we recommend at Support After Abortion, because we've done some deeper research to understand why such a limited number of people would know where to go. Most of the healing programs, as I mentioned, are religious in nature and are affiliated with some sort of church environment. Many of these healing programs were birthed in a church, offer beautiful resources to the community, but it's often hard for them to leave their four walls and connect in a social service way. And I want to say that again. If we want to look at the human issue, we need to meet humans where they are. And oftentimes it's in their social service needs that we meet them. And so I often encourage abortion healing leaders, those in the church, to go to the social service meetings in their local community, to build bridges there so that when a case manager encounters a woman who needs support, they can then be the referral source. Or perhaps a pregnancy center could reach out in the same way and offer their supports in that way. Here's why we want to look at this from a social service model. 16% of the time and 40% of the time for men, so 16 for women, 40 for men, wanted a religious-based approach. So more men than women, but think of that. If we know that more than 50% of those experiencing abortion are Christian, only 16% of women and 40% of men want a faith-based approach initially. And sometimes we get a kickback. People are like, but how do you heal without God? At Support After Abortion, we believe God is in and of everything. And if we don't start where people are, they're not going to get started. And so we've worked with folks like Word Among Us, we've worked with Georgette, we've worked with others to better understand that if we start with more of a clinical approach or a human approach or a meet you where you are approach, would that be detrimental in the healing journey? And actually everyone says no, it actually is what we believe the beginning to a connection on a journey towards their faith, towards returning to their faith or connecting to their faith. And so what we would encourage you to do is reach out to us after this conference. We have materials for you. We have resources for you. We have pamphlets, we call it Keys to Hope and Healing. It's a 6-week, very easy to negotiate beginning conversation for folks that aren't ready to start with a biblically based program in person inside the church. Another piece of this that I feel like is really important is 69% of the time women said, and 77% of the time men said, that anonymity was absolutely important to them. Okay, so maybe I'm going to get some kickback here, but Lisa, you said speak about it, and you said speak about it from a human connection. Yes, because that is what I would call like the macro level. If we're not inviting conversations at our church, if we're not bringing that conversation to a human issue, people aren't going to know how to do it. But when we're inviting people on that more micro level, that one-on-one level, people don't want to be standing up on stage or altar called or going to a Bible study that says abortion healing on the window or signing up for a Bible study, in the narthex or in the area outside the church to say, I'm signing up for the abortion healing group today. That isn't typically how folks want to. And so that's what we learned as a result of that Project Rachel experience is people had to go to a retreat in order to experience the healing. And that would mean that they'd have to be in person, they'd have to expose themselves, and they weren't comfortable with that initially. Now, what we've learned at Support After Abortion is that if a client can maintain their anonymity initially, break into a conversation that they have yet to break into, and then be moved to a group that's in person, they are much more comfortable with that. Zoom has also offered us a huge asset in this space too. Another interesting piece, 32% of women and 46% of men say, I would prefer support from a clinician, a mental health therapist, someone like me. But it's really sad for me to say this to you. Many of my colleagues were much like me, never even realizing that abortion was a need of our clients. And so we don't ask about it on our intake. We don't talk about it. It's not in our frame of reference when we're thinking about attachment to other children and woundedness around parenting and loss and grief. We don't even have it in our training to understand that abortion is a part of that. And so I'm on a mission this year in 2024 to build a CEU program for clinicians, for other providers, to better understand how to meet those who have experienced abortion and what we can do to better serve them. And so I'm getting ready to wrap up, Georgette. I know we're going to do some questions here, and it's my hope that we do have some really great dialogue. That's my favorite part of these conversations, and no question is inappropriate. So please feel free to ask whatever you can. But I do want to leave you with this. There is a really neat approach that was developed for Students for Life, actually, that I have now taught, I don't even know, to thousands of people, because the Students for Life folks just needed something very tangible to say, how do I talk to somebody who's experienced abortion? And so I'm just going to share that approach with you. It's on our website, supportafterabortion.com. If you are interested more in this conversation, we have abortion healing webinars that are at no cost to you every month. Please feel free to join us. There's many resources online. If you're thinking about somebody or you yourself are feeling pain today after this conversation, visit our website. We have tons of resources. We have a live chat. We have an abortion healing line that would be just beautiful for you to connect over. But this resource is here too. The 4 easy steps. Number 1, you have likely been introduced perhaps to this new way of thinking around abortion and the human connection today. And maybe perhaps this has always been your understanding. But it's our way of being is step 1. How do we talk about abortion in our circles? How do we talk about abortion healing in our circles? Do we really know our audience when we're talking? Some people say, but what if I don't agree with abortion? Know your audience. Know who you're talking about. If you're putting it out on Facebook or in your Twitter feed about how you feel about the political narrative around abortion, and your granddaughter reads that, or a friend of the family reads that, they're going to see you as somebody that is unapproachable around this topic. So I often encourage folks that feel like if they are in that space where they are very politically driven or have some real need to share where they stand on the abortion issue, just make sure that your conversation also includes something like, but I know there's men and women who are reading this right now that have experienced abortions, and I see you, I care about you, and there's support for you. There's no need to worry about what do I want to say here? You don't have to feel like by saying you need help or that people need help that you're supporting abortion in that way. People need to read that you're not judging them. And so that's the first step, is knowing where your biases are. How do you communicate about this issue? Where do you communicate about this issue? Who is your audience? And are you walking with a level of compassion and understanding for the 25% of people that are likely in your world that have experienced 1 or more abortions? So that's the first step. And I promise you, once you start to feel enlightened in that way and awakened in that way, and you expand your conversations, people will feel invited to talk to you. And so they might say something to you like, I've experienced abortion, or that was me. And when they do share that, because you've softened, you've opened yourself up, I want you to say, I'm so sorry for your experience. Sounds like that experience is heavy, or whatever else you might hear from them. But the acknowledgement, the validation that they are sharing something really difficult with you, maybe for the first time, and you're not just looking and going, oh my gosh, you experienced that? Oh my gosh, we got to get you help. I want you, as best as you can, to sit with that and say, I'm so sorry for that experience that you had. And oftentimes what happens, and what I hear stories being told back to me, is that people begin crying. They're shocked by those responses because nobody has ever shared in a compassionate, loving way about this, or they've been fearful because of the cultural narrative to even begin. And when you show up kind and compassionate with the heart of Jesus, you end up opening them up to an entirely different understanding. The third step, and my most favorite step, is then to say, would you like to share that experience with me? You have to be ready to receive it. But again, if this is somebody who's never talked about their abortion experience or never felt like they had a compassionate, loving person on the other end, you get to sit with them maybe for the very first time as they expose their story that they've been holding on to. And as we think about that repeat conversation about that this is a pro-life issue, top down, bottom up, can you just imagine the release that takes place in a conversation when you no longer have to harbor that pain? We've all been in those situations. I know we have, where we've held on to something that we thought we wouldn't tell anybody, or that, we were only going to tell one person, and we realize that we can't hold on to it that anymore, and we let it go. It changes our whole world. We feel freer. We have space to hold other things. We can care differently. We can love ourselves. We can connect to our Heavenly Father in a way that we never have been before, because we're not so bogged down by that pain and that trauma. And so that gives us that space. And then the fourth piece is just not to leave them hanging. Once they've given you the time and you've given your time, we want you to offer them the support and to say, hey, let's not end here. I'd love for you to reach out. And if it's support after abortion, if it's another healing ministry in your community, wherever that is, we want you to then extend that invitation to them to continue on that journey. And you might even say, can I follow up with you in a week to see how that went? And so this is just such a beautiful segue to what Georgette is trying to do in this post-Rowe era, this new frontier that we're in. Have a conversation with someone. I hope that these tools help you negotiate those conversations in a new and different way, so that you can feel more equipped to have healthy, communicative, compassionate, kind conversations with folks that aren't generated from a judgmental or biased place. And so without further ado, Georgette, I'm going to turn it back to you, and I'd love to start answering some questions.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. That was awesome. So fun to hear from you and all the information. Okay, so here's the tricky thing. Oh, goodness. I'm getting this thing. I called AAA by accident. Have no idea how I just did that. Can you tell we're working with new technology? All right, so I have questions on the two sides here already, but let me also just give our virtual audience a heads up. There is the slide with the phone number that will take you to the AAA. No, it will take you to why I called AAA. We are using Google Voice on my iPad, and unfortunately, I have my contact list opened, and I need to figure out how to close that. Anyway, if you text your question to that number, 412-515-0293, I will get it on my iPad so I can pose that question to Lisa as well. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to start with Emily. You have a question for Lisa?
I was asked to run the microphone.
Oh, you're going to be, okay, so you guys are the microphone managers. All right. Okay, that's what I wasn't sure.
On though? Can you ask?
It's not on yet, but, audio folks?
Test.
Testing the two microphones.
Hello? Not yet.
All right, they're working on it. Okay, go ahead up and let's get teed up for it.
I still think it's not on.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question and I'll repeat it so everybody can hear it.
So my question is,
Test.
youth program, and I think those were the initials?
CPU. Yep.
So
Test. CEU, sorry. It's clinical credits towards, isn't that what Continuing education credits, that's what it is for. Thank you, yep.
Test.
First question is just overall,
Test.
what kinds of topics are you thinking of addressing, and how would you approach them for clinicians in our day? And then most particularly because so many in the medical field
Test.
are so pro-abortion as a solution to any life issues that they're presented with. Your overall approach is non-political, non-combative. Do you feel like you're going to be able to introduce curriculum that helps the clinicians overcome their, bent towards leading people toward abortion for a solution?
Test.
And helping them to see the damage of abortion, and also helping them to be open to people who are post-abortive, that come into their practices and need that kind of help? Thank you.
That was a lot of questions.
Test.
Okay, first of all, she's asking about the topics that you're going to use in the CEU credits. Like, what kind of topics are you hoping in the curriculum that you're designing? What topics are you going to be covering? And then the second question relates to more of the nature of the healthcare industry's pro-abortion philosophy. How do you combat that? I'm trying to summarize a little bit.
Yeah, great question. So the CEU program will encompass about 20 credit hours, and it's going to feel a lot like this conversation, just elaborated for clinicians and those that serve folks in the social service industry to better understand what abortion is. So many people don't even really understand, all the way through all the emotional impacts, the needs for healing, how to ask the questions in intake. I'm going to bring in elements of codependency and attachment theory, and all the ways in which you might see somebody trained on suicide, just to educate folks to elevate this conversation in a more clinical way. And so those are going to be the gist of our topics. And then in terms of the conversation in the healthcare industry, as I said in my presentation, a lot of the providers that we see, they might think that abortion is necessary, but it's not that they don't think abortion hurts people. And so we often find our conversations being bridged when we talk about the healing part of it. And so I've talked to gynecologists, I've talked to doctors, emergency room doctors, many people that might not agree with my political perspective, but they believe that people deserve to have health afterwards. And that's where we're at Support After Abortion, building the bridge there. I just spoke at a conference that was sex trafficking related, and many of the folks, because of where they're coming from and feeling forced into their abortion experiences, they might not agree with us politically, but they will say that people that I know need healing afterwards, and I see their pain. And so that's how we at Support After Abortion, we're very fortunate to be able to intersect different groups of people, lots of diversity with the healing message.
All right, thank you. I've got two questions coming in from online. The first one is, many women who have experienced abortion struggle with forgiving themselves. How can we best respond to this when we know the forgiveness she needs is from Jesus, and forgiving yourself is not biblical and keeps women from finding true healing?
Oh, such a good question. It's a journey. So many folks that I serve, it's a journey towards that innermost place inside of us. And so a lot of times, whatever that woundedness on the outside is, right, needs to be met with love and kindness and compassion. And really, it's the safety of relationships that allows us to keep digging deeper into those internal wounds. And so the forgiveness piece is a big piece. And it's hard for us to even enter into that when we don't feel safe in ourselves and when we don't feel safe in our communities and in our families. And so I hope that this conversation leveraged a different way of seeing how we can enter in with safe conversations, healthy conversations, compassionate conversations, and trust that the Lord will continue doing that internal work as we continue to show up with love and kindness.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to tell, we have a question here. All right.
My question is, as a clinician in a pregnancy.
Hold on, we need to get this microphone.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, as a clinician in a crisis pregnancy center, I would love to be able to share, because we'd like to normalize the need for healing as we're talking to our patients. So can you share where your research is coming from, like what the statistics that you were giving earlier, where can we find those so that we can kind of share that with our patients?
You know what, Lisa, this is a great time because the other question has to do with how do we get people to the Support After Abortion connection. When we meet someone who needs help, how do we get them into contact with Support After Abortion? So you can talk about your website and the research and how to get to it.
Yeah, that's great, Georgette. So really, the website has tons of information for you, supportafterabortion.com. As I mentioned, we have an abortion healing webinar every month for the clinician that asked the question. I would encourage you to attend next month and see the community that's there. We have about 150 people that show up every month for that. And then, of course, there is a client-centric track on our website. There's a provider-centric track. Free of charge. We have a beautiful donor that wants everybody to connect with all of these resources. So you have all the research, everything at your disposal. I've seen pregnancy centers and churches change the way they do things based on the research that we've provided. They've printed it out and brought it to their board meetings. And it's definitely enlightened the decision makers in their organization to make change.
All right. And so Support After Abortion is a wonderful website. Oh, we have one more question. Susie.
I work with a local pregnancy center, Life First, and I'm their abortion recovery facilitator. And I'm very familiar with your website. It's great. But the newest thing to me is coming at it from a non-faith-based, which is sometimes kind of hard for me. But anyway, I'm interested in knowing more about your virtual groups and how that's working, and are people showing up for them?
Yes, they are showing up. We feel like the virtual approach is actually substantiating some of the research we've done, because it's easier to not show up in your local community in a building that you might see somebody. And so my first virtual group that I led back during COVID, I had women from Canada, New York, California, Mexico. I mean, it was a beautiful blend of folks, and they were all really young. They were between the age of 20 and 35, which was very unique to from what I had experienced prior to that. And in terms of that non-faith approach, I'm careful to say that I think that kind of narrative has taken off. Everything we've done has been done through a belief that Jesus is in everything, that our Heavenly Father is equipping us with this understanding and the research to help meet people where they are. And so we've tried to call it a clinical approach, a meet you where you are approach, because we see women and men walk through this curriculum and find God through it, and see people differently and see their own lives differently. And so for those of you that are struggling with that, I just want you to know that you're not alone. There's a lot of people that feel that way.
But I think of it as a first step, maybe.
It is.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay, we've got to move on. Lisa, thank you so much for giving us your morning. Sorry you couldn't be here in person, but we love you. Blessings to you.
Yes.